Hey guys, welcome back to the Generalist. A couple of things. I'm going to leave the announcements till the end. I'm going to stop doing the announcements, I think, at the beginning and the end. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think you care at the beginning if you don't listen to the full podcast anyway. And if you listen to the full podcast anyway, you'll hear them at the end. So unless there's something particularly important, I will not mention it till the end of the podcast. At the beginning of the podcast, there's going to be a weird skip in sound. I didn't take anything out of there. It's just that I accidentally started recording in a different mode than I meant to. So I kind of stopped and went back to it. So you'll see while I think Charlie is speaking, the sound just kind of changes fairly dramatically. It's within the first 3 or 4 minutes of the actual talking. So don't worry about that. I didn't actually take anything out except maybe me saying shit. Cassie joined us for the podcast. She talked a little bit. She was mostly just there because it's her play and she wanted to see the doing of the podcast, but she came in and she talked a little bit too. So if you hear somebody and you're like, who's that? It's Cassie, the same person we had in the episode with the playwright. That's her. One more thing, the only announcement I will make in this section, because I've been meaning to make it for the past couple of weeks and I keep on forgetting, we're now also available on YouTube, so you can go to the Generalist on our YouTube channel and listen to our podcasts there if you prefer to listen to it sitting at your computer and have it open on YouTube. So, without further ado, enjoy. Welcome to the Generalist, a show with a man who knows very little bit about a lot. A man who specializes in nothing in particular. A man who knows that he knows nothing. A man who can be described as non-specific. And to top it off, he narrates his own intros. This is The Generalist with your host, Saul Ackerman. Anyway, welcome to The Generalist. Charlie and, remind me your name one more time?
Jeff.
Damn it, Jeff. Right, Charlie and Jeff, you guys are here for the New York City Fringe Festival. I feel like a morning radio talk show host. Doing a play called From the Deep. Tell me a little bit about the play, because I actually haven't seen it yet. I will be seeing it, but I'm curious to know a little bit about it.
Take it, Charlie. You start us off.
You just put everything on him. You're like,
Yes,
Charlie,
I
you
do.
wear the headphones, do all the shit. All right.
It's the privilege of age. It's a two-person play
Yeah.
about two young men who find themselves trapped in a white room. They each have secrets. They don't know very much about each other. And they're both trying to figure out what their relationship is to each other, to the room, to their lives outside. And there's a question of whether or not they might have some kind of agency over the other person's fate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a good thing, and also the room itself is not real, but it is. Yeah.
Great description. All right, Charlie, I'm going to ask you to move a little bit closer to the mic.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, that is better. All right, cool. All right, so basically, you told me nothing.
Yep.
From what I know, and I haven't seen the play yet, but from what I know, it's based on the Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit, right? And one of you is, and again, I don't really know what's going on. I get it from the way you're talking about that there's some twists.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give my summary, and you guys could say no comments. But you have two people in a room, one who's Gilad Shalit, and one who is... Shit, I do know a little bit more than I realized.
Yeah.
I will jump in and say one thing.
Yeah.
Just for people listening, even though Gilad Shalit was... The character I play is based on him,
yeah.
Cassie changed a lot of stuff, so
it's not actually
it's
him.
It's not him.
Yeah.
Got it.
Inspired
Yeah.
by him. Yeah.
Question. Sorry to go here immediately, but do you guys get any backfiring from the fact that you're doing sort of an Israeli story because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict stuff going on?
So far, I haven't experienced any. Have you?
I haven't heard any, and we don't really, because you don't branch into, why the war is happening, any conflict that is going on, or anything like that. It's
right,
more,
it's just more about the psychological stuff.
exactly.
Got
It's
it.
more of just the being in the room, more so
Got
than
it.
talking about the why.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
people have come up and wanted to know if I'm Israeli and where I'm from, and that's the only kind of
Do you do an
Israeli
Israeli
feedback.
accent the whole time?
yeah. They have
Let's
to
hear
do it. So this is without warming up, or were we thinking about it too much this morning because to rest from our tech rehearsal last night. What do you think?
That's pretty good.
תודה רבה.
באמת, זה טוב מאוד. And you're not Israeli, I take it?
No.
Damn, that's good. So we got a Scottish, we got an Israeli.
Yeah.
Damn, pretty good. And you play the other person.
Yeah, I play Andrew Dayton.
Andrew Dayton.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a hardcore American.
He is very much American. Very, very American.
How'd you guys end up doing this play?
Well, there was a reading that the first reading I was not a part of, and that Charlie was still as Elon, and then the second reading that was needed for Cassie to submit to the Kennedy Center, she asked me to do it, to read for Andrew, and we read together. I guess we had good chemistry from there,
And we kept reading together.
we kept reading together. We did two more. We did one more reading. And then when it went up, it was just us. So, because we already knew it, we already had a rapport, we already knew each other. Yeah, and it's been really nice. And right when we got that thing for Fringe, the email for Fringe, that it got accepted, it was just like, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's do it again.
That's
Not a
really
problem.
awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about the Fringe Festival. I don't know a lot about it. I know it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about what the Fringe Festival is, how big it is in terms of career and stuff like that, just out of curiosity.
Well, I've actually been in the Fringe 2 times before.
Oh, cool.
Earlier in my life, and it's a really, really cool festival. There are shows from all over the world that converge in New York during these 2 weeks. So it's a chance to get to see a lot of different kinds of stuff and meet a lot of artists. And then some shows end up getting picked up for later stuff during the Fringe. Some don't.
You're saying it's a good career opportunity? You can say that. It's cool.
I mean, it can be. I think it depends on a lot of factors. The show itself and how marketable it is, the luck of who ends up being there, and all of the stuff that we have no control over.
Right, of course. Tell me a little bit how you guys got into... I really feel like a morning show. I'm not liking this at all. But how you guys got into acting?
Well, I started when I was 14, so that's 16 years ago now. I was going to audition for my middle school musical the year before, and I was going to audition on Friday. They had auditions on Thursday and Friday, and I was going to go on Friday. I was sick on Friday, and then I pleaded with the director, being like, come on, you gotta let me do this. And she said, no, we don't make any exceptions. So the next year I was like, I gotta do this and get in. And I auditioned, and my first role ever was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof Jr.
Nice.
in 8th grade. And from there...
Wait,
kept...
Fiddler on the Roof
Junior? Oh, yes.
What the hell is Fiddler on the Roof Junior?
It's like cut so it's not the 2.5 hours long.
Oh, that's fair.
Fiddle on the Roof. Because we're like middle schoolers where we'd lose interest being on stage anyway. So it's just this cut thing, and I found a tape of it years ago, and I watched it, and I had to shut it off. I couldn't even watch myself. It was so
Isn't
bad.
that how it always is? Whenever you do something, like a couple of years later, you're like, holy shit, I
Yeah.
can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
Cassie's nodding her head.
Mhm.
By the way, Cassie from a couple of episodes ago, whatever it was called, playwriting and telling a story, something like that, is sitting in the room with us. She's the writer of the play. That's it? Director? Stage manager? Producer. Writer and producer. None of the other 2 things I just said. So,
Yeah.
Hi. Cool. And how about you, Charlie? How'd you get into acting?
I always wanted to be an actor, but I thought I was going to become a lawyer.
Yeah, totally the same thing.
Yeah.
Explain further, please.
Well, in my family, most people are either doctors or lawyers, and I was terrible with science. So
Sure you're not Israeli?
we're all
Deep down.
they're all Israeli. So I was gonna go to law school. So I was an English major in college. I tried to do everything right so that I could hold on to my dream of being an actor, but then also be ready for law school. And then at the very end of my senior year, I just decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I took some acting classes, went out to an amazing program in Arizona for a summer, and decided that I wanted to go to grad school, but that I wanted to act for a while first. So I spent about 5 years acting in Boston, moved to New York, went to grad school, kept acting, and yes.
So acting is really interesting to me because it's one of those things that seems like it's super easy, but whenever you try to do it, like for somebody like me with no training, or even maybe with training probably, you suck at it. You watch yourself, you're like, that's not convincing at all. So how does one balance, and this may be too general of a question, but how does one balance the way a person truly acts with the theatrical part of it to make it seem believable but not over the top and stuff like that? It seems like a really tough thing to do.
Yeah, like the over the top getting into melodrama, which sometimes we do use. Like it is like a tactic that you can do and utilize within the stage. And sometimes when you are on stage, we're projecting. It's definitely larger than life. Your facial expressions are normally a lot bigger, so people in the back row can see and hear you. But the biggest thing that's made it like real for the actor and real for the audience is it's a real emotion. I remember the biggest thing is like we're not pretending anymore. It's like these things that we're feeling, we're really feeling them. That like it's not made up, but I'm still not that character. Like me personally, I'm not that character, but within I am saying these lines and connecting with them and feeling exactly what he's feeling. So you see emotion, you see interaction, you see who this person really is because you're really feeling it.
That's cool. How do you get to that point? How do you internalize emotions that aren't your own? It's really interesting.
But they kind of become yours, I think, in a strange, mysterious kind of way. Mm-hmm. And I would say also that in some sense, the rehearsal process, to use a bad metaphor for the show, is like laying out a minefield.
Yeah.
So that with each scene, we're setting up all these little mines that we know are going to explode, and we pretend to forget that they're there, and then we make sure that we step on them.
Yeah. Because you have everything that is already laid out. You have to be surprised. Yeah. If you have to be surprised, you know it's coming. Yeah. But then you have to make it real at the same time.
So interesting. It seems so hard to do.
But to go back to your question, I think the other thing is that we develop really good defense mechanisms to protect ourselves in life. And so I think part of this process of acting is dismantling them to some degree so that you're accessing kind of a primitive...
It's interesting. It sounds almost like a psychedelic thing where you kind of leave your body and are able to... Well, it's not exactly like a psychedelic thing, but where you're able to essentially become empathetic with another person, whether that person exists or not. Do you find that that's the case, that you guys are... that acting makes you a more empathetic person or more understanding of different views than your own and stuff like that?
Definitely. I would say that aging with theater has, even if I disagree with folks and even if I get angry with them, normally I will reflect later and be like, I see why you have that opinion.
Right.
Like, I see why you reached that point. Even though I don't agree with it, it doesn't fit my sensibilities, I see why. And it's like, I can't really hold it against you. I'm not going to agree with it and it might still make me angry, but at least I'll see why.
And then I also think if I ever have to play you, like, what are you doing?
Exactly. I played a villain before. I played a rapist, and it was almost kind of scary being like, so why did he do this? And getting into the reasons why and being like, oh yeah, I see how you got there.
Interesting.
Oh shit.
That's kind of like that stuff that I don't know if any of this is actually true, but where you see these people who play like a character like the Joker who seem to go bizarrely crazy while they're doing it. Is that a real thing? Or do you think that's all show?
We were just talking about this last night, actually.
Yeah, okay, tell me more.
Jeff will talk about it.
That's really difficult. It's not really difficult because I see people like Daniel Day-Lewis who...
Well, Daniel Day-Lewis is a special case. That guy literally becomes... He
is amazing. Yeah. He's an incredible actor. But then you hear, like you said, with Jared Leto. Yeah. And I think he's a big piece of shit. He's a big piece of shit. If you're not able to disassociate yourself with that, I don't think you're a good actor. Like, I think it makes you weak.
But isn't that what method is? Kind of becoming the character? I mean, I don't know.
I do not believe in method. Like, mine is like, you can say your lines, you're in the moment, you are able to get into the mind space, you do it, and then you're not it anymore, off.
One would hope. Otherwise, it's not acting. Otherwise, you're that's true. I hear that.
Yeah. So I was, and this stuff that he did, especially since it was overblown. I think that is ridiculous. I think it is dumb. I think it's dangerous as well. Because if you really do, which some people can, you develop another personality, and then it becomes dangerous because it takes you over.
I'm gonna jump in, because my process is slightly different.
Do you do method?
No. So, I mean, well, that's it's complicated.
Complicated way.
So, okay, I'm trying to figure out like where to start. So I think, to skip over like what I'm doing technically.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm playing a new role, I go through this period where I feel like I have to undo myself, and I have to kind of figure out what it physically and emotionally feels like to be this other person, and then I kind of hold on to it, and it stays with me, and it makes me feel. I say this the right way. It makes me feel like I know who I am as the character, and there's this period. Which is why I hate really short processes, because it takes about 2 weeks, and I feel stressed and frustrated, and then suddenly I feel like someone else, kind of, and then I feel more complete, and then everything feels easier. And then when the show is over, then I have this mourning period where I have to let the character go because it's not me and it isn't part of my life. But then I feel totally bereft for a long time, and I feel kind of empty and like I don't know what to do with myself.
Interesting. So if you have you ever played two characters in different plays, or
yes, different... So if it's having to switch characters very quickly, I have to have something that will be kind of a psychophysical trigger that I can either say or do or touch, or something that'll
switch you into that mode.
Yeah, but I have to build all those things so that I can trigger it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, just to say, it's kind of with that. Like, I know, say with Andrew, my posture changes. I hold myself, and my just physicality changes, and so it's like I will drop into character during the show, and then afterwards, sometimes it's like, you know, you just have to stretch out of it a little bit.
Right, I hear that.
So yeah, I agree with you. So it's one that I know it's very harsh that I say method, but it's just who stay in it completely and live that character that I am just. I am personally fully against. If it works for you, it works for you. That is what I have to say.
There's the empathy we're talking about.
Yeah.
I will say also, just in terms of, not to support what might be crazy, but I think on a film set, with the amount of time that you have to wait and then be ready to go on, if you're not staying in character, and it has to be really precise, and there's an enormous amount of money at stake, and I think in a sense it's easier to hold on to it instead of letting it go, because I don't know. It depends on the person, but especially I think if it's something that's terrifying for you, whatever that may be, it may be harder to get to that, whether it's joy or hatred or anger or fear, whatever it is. So if you just stay there, even though it feels awful, it can be easier then, I think, to get the moment right.
Does it ever carry on? Like, can you ever not get rid of it? You guys ever have a hard time getting rid of say you're playing a character who is extremely depressed or in extreme fear, perhaps, as in this play, or both in this play probably. Getting out of that, does it ever kind of stick with you for a while, and it's hard to just let go of that depression, even though you're not actually going through that thing? You felt like you went through that thing.
For me, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I have to notice it and pay attention, and then I have to do something ritualistic and physical to shift it so that I don't keep holding on to it. And sometimes I do anyway.
Okay, here's an interesting... Oh, wait. You want to answer that question, or you're good? So here's an interesting kind of taking that ability to do that and flipping it around in a different way. If you yourself, Charlie, is going through a depressing situation or have some sort of psychological issue at any given time, I'm not saying to what extreme, can you, in the same way that you create a character, get rid of that by creating a character? And have you ever done that? And is that even a healthy thing to do? I don't know. That last one, you might not be able to answer.
That's a good question. I think sometimes, occasionally if I'm feeling pretty awful, I'll take out a script and read a little bit of like a monologue, and it will help me shift. But sometimes I'll just do the same physical work that I do as an actor to shift my emotion, and a lot of it has to do with breath. So usually if I'm holding on to something, it means that I'm not breathing. So if I shift my breath and get more oxygen and then do something physical, I can usually shift whatever's going on.
That's really interesting. In a lot of philosophies, especially when you go into Eastern philosophies, breath is sort of everything. And the idea of changing your breath to match a specific condition would make so much sense to get that condition. So that's actually really, really interesting. Is that something that you knew about, you associated with it, or is that just something that... How'd you get to doing breath work in terms of getting to a character, I guess is my question.
That was my voice teacher, Kristen Linklater, and breath is the basis of all of her voice work. And Jeff has the same training, so that's actually really nice for us because we share this basic training.
That's really
that has to do with breath. Yeah. So we notice if we're breathing together or if we're not.
Yeah, and even just to get into a space, sometimes our warm-ups have to do with just breathing together and just being on the same kind of level, same page, just to ground ourselves, and then from there can kind of go from it. But it's really weird because I know a lot of actors have a lot of problems like dealing with their own emotions. It's very hard, and it's like I'd say myself, I definitely do as well. But it's a catharsis to play these parts, and it almost helps you let go of an emotion you have without it being you. So it's very interesting how guarded we are with ourselves, but then being somebody else, it's almost like the way of getting rid or expressing your emotion through a mask, through another way, is the only way to deal with it.
This actually, it is interesting because it gives you kind of a way to express an emotion that you may not express in your real life, but you're like, oh, I'm acting, everyone's cool with this, and you get to be in a real comfortable place, and even though it's not you, you may still be able to get rid of that. So that's actually really interesting. That would be an interesting therapy.
Well, there is
acting therapy. Is that a thing?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. I don't know too much about it.
Yeah.
I can actually talk to my friend who I'm staying with right after this because she is a drama therapist. But it is able, since we are so guarded, like just our society, how we have been, especially men, I will say that it's like you're not allowed to show emotion. You're not allowed to do these things. And being able to disassociate yourself and make it almost somebody else lets you feel it. And it does that, like they say... You see, sometimes it's easier to talk to a puppet or talk through a puppet. And it really is. It somehow makes it not you anymore because you're not focusing on you. You're focusing on this other thing. And then you tap into it. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I know that like acting has personally helped me with relationships and with myself.
In what way?
Just like
if
the
you don't
empathy. No, not a thing. Just like with empathy and getting through a lot of personal loss. Like, I had this one acting class when I was in college that it was one of the most pivotal things that I've had in my career and kind of in my life. And the exercise was we got into a line, or there were two lines facing each other. And the exercise was you just stared at the person across from you and you went 2 by 2. So it was just you and the person across from you, and the rest of the class would watch. And you would just sit there, breathe, take the other person in. And when one person got the impulse to do something, anything, they did it. So it's like breathe, really take the other person in. And we had some people who, like one person would step forward and the other person would turn around. We'd have people step back a little bit.
That's really interesting.
And mine, I sit there and I thank whatever in the universe. I was paired with this one girl that she was like, the most perfect person I could have had, that I just stared at her and she was staring at me, and I just remember I took this one breath and I started sobbing.
Oh wow, interesting.
Immediately.
Not where I thought that story was going.
Yeah. And it was just this thing. I think I was just standing there and I wasn't moving, and she took one step forward and I just broke.
Wow.
Totally broke. And it was amazing to have that experience that it was breathing, really taking the other person in and not letting yourself go guarded. And it's like you're in a very, very supporting environment too. And so we just had that moment and we just stepped forward, and like it was this beautiful thing that I let go. I felt so much come out.
Do you know what that was? Like, can you put into words what that was? If you want to, if you don't want to, it's understandable.
What do you mean?
Do you know what it was that caused you to start sobbing? Was it something that was happening with you, or was it just?
Yeah, it was something that I was holding on to, and it was amazing that having one person almost like we had this connection and we really made it, and then having a person step forward, it like just destroyed me that someone else is there to support, to help. And I just remember that step, I just lost it. It was like any single really wall that I had, it was gone.
That's so interesting.
Gone. And it was amazing, and it literally changed my life.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That reminds me of and maybe not to this extreme, or maybe yes to this extreme, I don't know. But I don't know if you remember maybe a year ago or so, there was a study that came out of how to fall in love with anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and all you had to do was like stare into their eyes and ask like 20 specific questions.
Yeah.
And supposedly, so that's what that reminds me of. But yeah, it's the idea. I mean, the whole idea of the eyes being the window to the soul, and in many cultures and stuff like that, when you stare at somebody, you see something.
Yeah.
And we feel that all the time. Like, you look at somebody and you feel like, no, I don't want to deal with you. Or you look at somebody and you go like, I want to deal with you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
You have any experiences like that?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me more.
God, I mean, we did some similar stuff in grad school. There was one exercise I remember. I think we were put in groups of 3, and we had to keep making eye contact, breathe, and look at each other, and try to take everything in and just see the whole person. And then eventually we had to start touching each other and breathing. And I think we were all just weeping. We had to touch each other's faces. And it's very, very hard to look at someone for that long and also touch them and not feel some kind of empathy and connection.
Of course.
So actually, sometimes when I teach, I will make my students sit in front of each other and make eye contact for about half an hour. It feels like, at first it feels like way too long for them, and then at some point they usually lose track of time and their sense of time changes. But it's just extraordinary to see how different people look after they've had this kind of connection.
That's really cool. You guys ever practice like meditation and stuff? You guys ever practice meditation? Do you guys ever practice meditation? Do you find that a helpful thing? If you do, in terms of acting or in terms of, because it keeps a lot of the things you're saying to me strike a really interesting chord of sort of Eastern philosophy with me. Not only Eastern philosophy, but mainly Eastern philosophy. And I wonder if you guys ever practice anything like that, or if you're at all interested in that, or if you've looked into that and you see any similarities between the stuff you're talking about and these philosophies.
Oh yeah, I would actually, our vocal warm-ups, like what we do to get ready, is meditative. It is yoga with breathing and vocal work.
Well, that's the idea of mantras anyway.
Yeah, and so a big thing is when you're kind of lying down in your neutral position before you start moving, is you have a bubble of sound that comes up and out through you, and you slowly build from this, and then you start humming. In the hum, you're supposed to feel down in your toes, and you just make it through your whole body, and it becomes...
That sounds like certain meditation techniques.
Very much, yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, and it very much like resonates within the... Is it Hindi? Kind of with the Om.
Yeah.
Within it, because we have to resonate. We resonate with our whole body to get the sound out, to make ourselves heard within it. And I do remember when I was just doing movement and voice in college, that I was on a different plane for a little bit of time, and I remember I saw the world differently.
What do you mean by that?
This
is the stuff that fascinates me, so I'm always going to thrive when you say stuff like that.
And it's like, I do wish I could go back to college and have these 4-hour classes now that were just, it was yoga and then touching emotion as well. But I do remember I saw the world differently. Like, the trees sparkled more, but they did.
That sounds right.
They
that sounds
did.
like meditation stuff, or even even like tripping.
Yeah.
Well, it's all mindfulness. I don't know if you can hear me well. It's all mindfulness practice. I mean, I do it as a writer. Like, as a writer, sometimes, you know, from my normal everyday baseline, I'm not going to be able to tap into Elon, to tap into Andrew, because I'm not those people either. But as a writer, I have to kind of do mindfulness practice, mindfulness work, which I do for my own personal self, but because I need to be able to be in the moment. And I think that's what's very similar about Eastern philosophy and also acting, is that living in the now.
Very much,
and being present versus being stuck in the past, being stuck in the future that doesn't exist. You know, just finding that sense of this moment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I think a show like this lends itself to that because it's so dense and so quick that it forces us to be in the moment.
Yeah. Right.
So so doing the show ends up being a meditation, I think.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's very odd with this one because sometimes we're like, you know, as an actor, you're like, wait, what does come next? And sometimes we just are like, I hope you remember.
That's interesting. I was about to ask about that. Like, what does happen when do you ever, like, not fall out of character? You're probably still in character, but like, oh shit, what comes next?
I mean, there are, like we said, the minefield sort of thing. There are things that we latch onto that is like, these are important plot points that have to be said. And then it's just like, how do we do? And there is that improvisatory aspect that we do. So it's like, since we both know the play so well, and in any show, it's just like, what did we miss? What comes next? And how do we fill this? Because we both are living in the character now. We are that. So we can just have our normal responses. And sometimes it's, you just kind of make up a line, you make it up, and then you drop back in and you remember it. You keep going. And it's terrifying at that moment, but
it is so terrifying.
Yeah.
But also, I think at this point, hopefully, I'm going to knock on wood here so everyone can hear it. If one of us forgets something or messes something up, if it's something important, then
they'll say the other one will set you up.
Yeah. So that we'll get back on track.
Exactly.
Have you guys ever, like, at the same time forgotten something and just kind of gotten on in conversation as your characters before finally remembering and getting back to what you're supposed to?
Only in rehearsal.
Yeah.
Only in rehearsal.
I feel, nothing huge. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we haven't.
Yeah, no, not much.
Cassie, question.
Yeah.
You wrote the play?
Yes, I did.
Have you changed it specifically for these two guys? Specific lines or specific ways of being because of the way these two guys act?
I would say very yes, but I also...
Very yes.
Very yes. Very
Not
yes.
just a little yes.
Very yes.
But I feel like I'm a very collaborative writer. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that, but I'm not super precious about my words. Like, there are things that I'm like, no, we're keeping this. But in terms of this play, especially for this time around, this production, we had to cut about 10 minutes from the show. We ended up cutting about 15 minutes from the show. And a lot of that came from... We had to cut it for the Fringe, you know, to fit our venue slot. But a lot of it came from Charlie and Jeff here because they were like, okay, this feels repetitive in this moment. Or didn't we just say this 3 lines earlier? Or, you know, if we structure this sentence differently, it's going to be easier for me to kind of go from point A to point B to point C. And a lot of that stuff, it's like, at the end of the day, I'm not an actor. Stop doing that. A long time ago, we talked about that on my podcast.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm not an actor, so as much as I can say things aloud to myself while I'm writing, it's completely different when 2 people embody these characters and then say it to each other. So, and I find that with, you know, this show and I Shut Door Open, where you get into rehearsal and I think you just have to be open to listening to the actors, and in the same way, listening to the way they speak and breathe. You know, we've talked a lot about, and the character Andrew has a very specific speech pattern. And Elon has this soldier pattern, but then he has these Israeli sort of things where, you know, we're like, okay, conjunctives in English don't really work. You know, an Israeli is not going to say won't, he's probably going to say would not.
Right.
And that's just because of translation and, you know, how that language is.
Damn, you don't think about... I don't think about these things. You clearly do think about these things.
Right, but it's like when you speak in Spanish, and then you are translating Spanish into English.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you'll say things like, you know, pass me the whatever.
Yeah, I'll say weird things.
You'll say weird things.
Yeah.
And someone might look at you who speaks, you know, English as their first language and be like, why did you say it like that? You could have easily said it like this, and that would have been normal, and no one would have made a crazy face at you.
Yeah, and I think in the first episode I recorded, I said something, and the guy I was talking to, he's like, "That's not a sentence." And I'm like, "It's not." I was sure it was real. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I always like doing this.
Nice.
Just talking about personal philosophies, and this can go anywhere from your exact personal philosophy, the things you think, to what you think the world is like or the universe is like. All this stuff, super interesting to me, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it. So,
All right.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
very open-ended.
yeah. And if it's too open-ended, I could get more specific. I could ask
Yeah.
specific questions, but I like starting off open-ended
Mhm.
to see if you guys have anything particular to say.
Sure.
So, go ahead and pick it up if you're ready. If not, I'll get more specific.
Mhm.
Shall I jump in?
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah,
All right.
go for it.
I am finding that I think the most important person is me. No, I'm kidding. I think
I wish
good.
that were.
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
good.
that
That's right.
No, I'm finding more and more that I think that the most important thing in life is to do something to try to make the world a better place. Doesn't mean that you actually will, but if you really genuinely try, then I think you have done your duty. It's tough that there's so many things that are out of our control and so many things that are mysterious and impossible to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Do you
doing
think?
something good for other people, and
I'm
not just
get-
yourself.
I'm gonna ask you questions about this if you don't
Okay,
mind.
yeah, no.
When
Ask
you
away.
say good, what is good? What is bad? What do you consider good? Is there even such a thing as good? Is there even such a thing as bad? And do we actually have a duty to do anything?
Very good questions.
Thank you.
I think that there are many things that are murky, but I think that there are things that are good. If you can like be kind to other people's kids and make sure that they don't walk in front of a car. You can make eye contact and with someone who is disabled in a wheelchair and not make that person feel invisible. You can teach people and give them skills. You can feed people if they're hungry. You don't have to be selfish and
I agree, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not. I wasn't shitting on you. I was just kind of asking you questions about what you're saying.
But you could always take something and argue the opposite. That like there really
Always.
is no point to anything. Then like why does it matter? Because we're basically animals and we're supposed to eat each other.
Yeah, but you can also by the same logic of saying that why does anything matter? You could say why does anything matter and take it to a nihilistic point, or why does anything matter and take it to a good point. Essentially say nothing matter, which is why you should enjoy yourself, which is why it's okay to do whatever you want to do, because you're gonna die and everyone's gonna forget you eventually, and so enjoy yourself, have a good time. So it doesn't have to be a negative view of nihilism, if you want to call nihilism negative. But so that's why I'm asking you. Even when you say no, nothing is actually good, nothing is actually bad, still we do understand that within the realm, if you will, that we live, there are things that are kind and things that are unkind, which, by the way, also change with societies, with times, with the way the world is.
Right.
So even within that philosophy of no, nothing matters, there's still kind of subjective good and bad, as opposed to objective good and bad. But, yeah, that's cool. I like that. How about you, Jeff?
I like how you brought up nihilism, because I am hugely a nihilist.
Oh, tell me more.
I've had tons of loss in my life.
Yeah.
In my short life I've had so far, but I've had a lot of people die in my realm, and it's actually made me have a more positive outlook on life, because I'm not as afraid of death. Like, don't get me wrong, the fear is still there, but since I'm aware of it and I know it happens, and I know it can happen at any point. So there's no reason to guard yourself about certain things. There's no reason to hold back in certain elements. Like the good question, and what is good? I believe there is a concrete good. I truly do. But fear is a big thing that you should use. Like, things that you're afraid. There are some reasons that you should be afraid to not do, for, you're gonna die. But there's other fears that it's like, is it just anxiety that is holding you back, or is it real fear? Because I think one is a motivator.
Yeah,
that can
what
get
I
you
would say
through.
is there's a difference between fear and your reaction to fear.
Definitely.
So fear is okay, it's an emotion.
Yeah.
Anger is okay, it's an emotion. It's how you react to that emotion that is, say, good or bad.
Yeah. So it's like with all of this death, it's like you gotta have fun. There's no reason not to, but there's also no reason to hurt anybody else. Like the big thing that we can take away from this whole election process is when everyone's like PC, and it's like political correctness, and I hate that term as well. I think it's ridiculous. It's like, just think of it as be nice. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, don't be a dick.
Yeah, instead of calling it political correctness, it's like, don't be a dick. It's like, oh, I want to say all these things that I used to. It's like, yeah, but you're being a dick. It's like, well,
Right.
people were harder. It's like, no, you just were a racist. And people weren't calling you out on it. And you didn't realize that the things that, it's like, people need to take a joke. It's like, well, it's not a joke.
Yeah.
You're
I think there's a line there. I think there are times where things are a joke, where
Yeah.
people overreact.
Yeah.
Like in comedy.
Yeah.
This is a big pet peeve of mine. In comedy, when people make a joke and everybody goes crazy, dude, it's comedy.
Yeah.
It's supposed to push the boundaries
Yes.
of what's normal and whatever.
Yes.
Sure, if a person's getting up there and spending his whole act making fun of gay people, making fun of black people, making in a way that clearly seems like this guy doesn't like these people,
Mhm.
that's one thing.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
even if he says two jokes, but it's clear that there's a hatred there, there's a negativity there.
Yes.
That I don't like.
Yeah.
But if you're making a joke, it's just a joke,
It's
and
just-
it's a commentary.
Exactly.
And I was just doing a podcast with a comedian, and he was saying that very often these things that people get upset at are not even a joke about the thing. So somebody will make a joke about something and use the word rape
Mhm.
to compare it to something bizarre, to show the similarities.
Yeah.
And people will go crazy that they made a rape joke.
Yeah.
When the joke isn't about rape, he just said the word rape
Yeah.
to compare it to something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So other stuff like that.
Exactly. But I think you need to, I think we can actually live in a very cohesive, cohabitable world. We all have the same wants. We really do in the end of the
Yeah,
day.
absolutely.
We all have the same things, and I think we have just separated ourselves over the millennia.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at our tribes, even when the tribes were warring with each other, the tribes within themselves, they were socialists. They helped one another. You look at the native populations in the Americas that we wiped out, and like I said, even though they were
Yeah.
warring with each other, they helped each other. They lived with the earth as well.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge thing that we've lost. We've lost the connections just within our neighborhood. We don't really have communities anymore. You know?
Well, there are sort of, I would say, I wouldn't even call them necessarily artificial communities, but communities, and I think this is part of why people are attracted to religions.
Mm-hmm.
Because religions give you a community, but it doesn't just have to be religion. Sometimes it's acting.
Yeah.
You find your acting community.
Yeah.
Any sort of thing you do, you'll find a community.
Yeah.
And that has its positives, but it has its negatives, because the negatives also are, well, now there's us and there's them,
Yeah.
which is part of the separation you're talking about.
Exactly. And it's just like, you can see, you can find empathy, you can find common ground with anyone.
I agree
There is
wholeheartedly.
not a single person that you're going to disagree on everything. That is impossible. Because you can just go, you like breathing? I like breathing. Awesome. Great. We have one thing. Let's build from there.
All right, I'm going to jump back at something you said.
Sure.
Are we vacuuming right now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, Dommy's back.
All right, give it a second. We're going to do a pause so that I catch it, and then I'll take the noise out. 1 second. All right, I think that should be enough. Hopefully I'll be able to take that out. If not, you guys are listening to Vacuuming, courtesy of,
Vacuuming.
courtesy of the
generalist.
Generalist. The Generalist, brought to you by Vacuums. So yeah, taking it back to something you were saying,
Yeah.
getting more metaphysical, if you will,
Yeah,
or
sure.
not at all, if
Sure.
you prefer. What do you think happens in death? Do you think, well, I'll
Yeah.
just leave it at that.
I like when my dad died when I was 14, and he was also the Jewish side of me as well, but he did not believe anything happened. He think that was it. Like, you're dead, nothing happened. But then there's this weird thing where we had a Christmas cactus in our house that never bloomed. The day he died in July, it went into full bloom and died.
That's so interesting.
Really crazy. And there is that energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Right.
Like, I do fully adhere to science, but also it gets into kind of this spiritual realm where we
Yeah.
don't know. And
Well, I think we can agree that, and I think anybody would agree, I think, that science does not have all the answers.
No.
Now, it doesn't mean that it can't eventually have all the answers, but at the moment, we're not there.
And I think that's why I truly appreciate science, because they keep getting more questions and you dig more and more.
Yeah, I love science. Science is great.
Yeah, you don't have a final, this is what it is. I love science.
I love science.
But I do, and I'm very intrigued by it, and the basic building blocks and the foundations and the why. It's like, we don't have a concrete, so why not keep going for the answer, keep digging. And since we have that energy cannot be created or destroyed, we know our brain is with electrical impulses, is controlled by electrical impulses, and that's what we are. We're just this big gooey mass that's right up in our heads, and then everything else has been evolved from a single cell. So it's like that energy goes somewhere.
Right.
It's like, does it maintain and stay together? I don't know. It's like, I'm very hopeful, and I hear about those reborn people who they know where they died.
Oh yeah, the people who have those crazy stories.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff.
And they know people who are like who are 90 years old and be like, oh yeah, we did this together.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if it's a hoax. I take that with the pessimistic optimism.
Yeah.
That I don't believe it, but I want to.
Right.
And I do not know if there's anything after. I am not positive, but I do know the energy has to go somewhere, and mine is more of the cyclical. It goes into the earth.
Yeah. I guess ultimately the question is: are you your body? Where is your consciousness? Does it actually exist in your mind, or is your mind a way that tunes into consciousness? And if you're not your body and your mind, then what are you? And well, that could open a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting stuff. And the reason I asked you was because you brought up death, and you said you had a lot of death in the family, so it'd be interesting to see where that goes. But I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
And I take the same stance. I'm not saying like I believe this is the case, but I think it might be.
Yeah, it's like this makes the most sense to me right now and what I see, and then once more stuff comes out, if it disproves it, I'll go, all right, that was wrong.
And I think that's the healthiest stance to take, because even in science, sometimes what happens is you get scientific dogma, where this is the way it is, and we're not open to anything else.
Yeah.
When we know, for example, and maybe I'm going to sound like an idiot when I say this, but whatever, we know, for example, we have a limited range of visibility of how do you say that? For
the light spectrum?
Audibility. Yeah, the light spectrum.
Yeah.
But also, there's a limited amounts of sound waves that we can hear, and all these things. So and yes, there's still things we can do with instruments where we can see these other things, but we can only see things within our general range of perception.
Yeah.
Give or take, we can use X-rays to see things that we can't normally see, infrared, stuff like that. But who knows how much more is there that we haven't found, that we haven't named, because we're incapable of seeing it. Just like a century ago, probably less than a century ago, nobody knew what a cell was. Even shorter than that, nobody knew what DNA was. Now DNA is a thing. We go, oh, you look out into space, there's things a million times larger than us, and you look deep into the body and stuff, or even in atom stuff, there's things a million times smaller than us, but that's all, we're in the center.
Yeah.
We're in the center, we see as far that way and as far that way, but who knows, if we were an atom, how much smaller could we see, and how much less big can we see, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that could be something.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting to me, we talked about science, and I think the limitation to science right now, and again, I may sound like an idiot saying this, but whatever, is the scientific method necessitates the separation of things. It says, we need to separate this from everything else to be able to measure it. Unfortunately, and that's great. And by the way, I'm not shitting on science. I think we've done unbelievable things thanks to science, and that's one of the best things we've come up with, because we're able to basically prove things and say, well, we can repeat this. We know this works this way if we continue doing it. But the idea of being able to study things on a relation scale, how everything relates to everything else, because nothing in this world is really separate from anything. And again, obviously, I'm a little bit of an Eastern philosophy guy, so I think that way. But the truth is, you can't exist without the Earth, right? You don't exist outside of it. If there was nothing else, if there was just you, then there would be no you, because you'd be everything. Yeah. And just like you can't go into space without taking a can of Earth with you, if you will. You have to be in a can of Earth to be able to go into space. So,
can of Earth.
Yeah.
Brought to you by the generalist.
And so the same thing is true of everything. So, for example, if you were the only human being that existed on this Earth, you wouldn't be anything because you'd have nothing to compare yourself to.
Yeah.
So, where I think the scientific method is lacking today, and hopefully it'll get to that point, is being able to measure the relationships, not between one thing and another, because we can already do that, but the relationships between one thing and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think we could really get into some really interesting discoveries about maybe things that science doesn't even accept as possible right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ran away.
I'm for it.
Well,
Yeah.
we talk a lot. I mean, I think also in the theater world there is a different openness, and
Yeah.
and I think that exists in other communities as well. But we do have an openness to this sort of other stuff because, I mean, actors especially, but writers too. We have to tap into this greater I. You know, that it's not like me am the only thing that is conscious and breathing and whatever. And I think, you know, we talk in theater. We talk a lot about being haunted and how, like, I feel like the more theater people I meet are like, oh yeah, I believe in ghosts. Like, yeah, ghosts are a thing. Because theaters are haunted. Like, you can be in a theater and you can just, especially old theaters, you can just feel something creepy is here. Like, and that's something that, like, I'll talk to friends of mine who, for example, are in medicine and they're like, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Listen, I'm not saying there is such a thing as ghosts, but do you know?
No.
And
How
what
could
is it?
you know?
There's an interesting thing called simulation theory, and simulation theory alleges that we're essentially inside a computer program, and God, quote unquote, is just the guy who writes the code. It's some kid in his computer writing code, and we somehow gain consciousness and whatever. And where was I going with this?
Ghosts.
Any program
ghosts. Thank you. So the idea that you would have some sort of echo of something, a glitch in the program, if you were, I mean, and I don't think that's the only way. I don't really think simulation theory is necessarily the way things are. It's just another way of looking at it. If you look at it as a computer program, right, and you say, well, there's a glitch in the program, well, that could be a ghost or something like that. Or not in simulation theory and anything else, like what we were talking before, where what happens when you die, we don't know. We only assume. We assume that from a scientific perspective, we assume that nothing, because there's no brain activity. But again, is consciousness in the brain or not? We don't know. And we assume that consciousness is in the brain, by the way, because we go, oh yeah, it's over here. We think that. But there's a lot of cultures throughout history that assumed consciousness was in the heart, which is interesting. And I wonder, I don't know this, but I wonder if you were to sit down with one of them and you ask them, where do you think, if instead of pointing to their head, they were pointing to their heart?
Oh, yeah,
I wonder. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm dreaming here. But also the idea that maybe consciousness is, maybe the brain, if you will, is more of an antenna that taps into consciousness. And if that's so, then maybe something does happen. And I'm not talking about heaven or hell. You know, maybe. I don't know. Again, I'm not denying anything because I don't actually know what happens. But I think anything could be a possibility, and it's interesting. And the immediate denial of it, just because you can't, there's no proof of it, is not fair. But I get it. I do get it, and I'm thankful for those people, because those people are the people who have informed us in unbelievable ways because of science. Because they go, no, it's not true unless we can prove it's true. So there is kind of in the back and forth where, how do I know what I am if I can't compare myself to anything?
I do have to say one thing.
Yeah, please do.
It might even be, it's with ghosts and death and what happened, and kind of how what happened in the framework of my life to inform my opinions. When I was like 16 or something like that, I had a full-on out-of-body experience.
Oh, tell me more. I love this stuff.
I mistakenly astral projected, and it was terrifying. As I was just lying in my bed in the middle of the day, and then I was looking down at myself.
That's so awesome. Have you ever tried to... Well, tell me more, actually, first.
Oh, I just remember that I was lying there, and then I saw myself in my own bed, in my own room. And I just remember that happened, and I immediately, like, got up, and I like, ran out because I didn't know what happened.
Right.
But it was just that very interesting thing, and, you know, you talk about the out-of-body experience right before you die, and like when you're close to death that you hear about a lot, where the science combats it with the toxin that goes into and why
DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah, the DMT, and then why it's like it actually gives a scientific thing of why you see it. But then I personally had the experience where I saw myself, and I can't explain it. I don't know why, but that's that weird thing that it's like I was out of my body and saw myself.
Because I'm open to thinking that this can be a real thing, and I've heard many people other than you say it, I've actually tried to do that, and I haven't been able to. Yeah. Have you ever tried to do it again?
No.
oh, you should. There's such cool stuff about it. I mean, again, I don't know if any of it is true.
Yeah.
But you already got to that point where you were able to do it. So
yeah,
it's an interesting thing to play with. Also, lucid dreaming is kind of the same
I
mechanism.
love lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it happens. I mean, I still can't consistently fly, but I do remember there was one time very recently that I woke up after a night because I finally made myself fly the whole night.
Awesome.
I woke up and I was like, everything is awesome! Everything is the best!
I just had the trippiest dream the other day. It was yesterday, 2 days ago, Monday. I was on a plane. This is not a dream, this is actual.
Yeah.
I'm on a plane, listening to a podcast, flying back to New York from New Orleans. And I guess I dozed off. And at some point, the plane just starts landing. No announcement, nothing, just starts landing. I'm still listening to the podcast. And I see people start getting up. I have this big bag with me, and everything's all over the place. I'm stuffing it in, and I'm stuffing stuff in. So I finally get up. Everybody's walking out. I see some guy that I know barely walk by. I'm like, oh, cool. He was on my flight. I should say hi, but I didn't. And then I realize the plane's still moving. And I'm like, what's going on? It's night out. It was supposed to be day out. Holy shit, I'm dreaming. And as I'm dreaming, I wake up, and the pilot starts announcing that we're going to land. But the weirdest part of the whole thing, I remember the entire podcast, the actual podcast. I heard the whole thing while I was sleeping, which has never happened to me before. So that was a really cool, weird experience.
Yeah.
Were you listening? So you were listening to the podcast?
I was listening to
an
an actual podcast while I fell asleep, and I remember the whole podcast, the actual podcast, even though I was sleeping.
Wow.
Your brain processes language while you're sleeping, so apparently you're not supposed to go to sleep with something on all night, going on a loop, or you won't sleep properly because you'll just be...
That's
part of your brain
so
will be
cool.
processing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't usually. I fell asleep on the plane.
Yeah.
I thought I was still awake listening to the podcast. I was dreaming exactly the situation I was in, but slightly differently.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was a really cool thing. All right, do you guys have anything to promote other than obviously Go See From the Deep? When is it playing? Tell me a little bit so people know. I'll also put it in the show notes and stuff.
Do you have the times?
Yeah, so, the times are a little bit funky, but our shows start on August 12th, and we run until August 21st. We have 5 performances. Most of them are in the evenings, but we have a 4 p.m., and we have something like midday.
But if you come to the 4 p.m. on Thursday, I believe it's Thursday the 18th, there's a meet and greet
There's
afterwards?
a meet and greet, like an after party with food and drink and that sort
cool.
of stuff. So that'll be pretty cool. And... yeah, we're over at Teatro Latea, which is in the East Village.
Lower East Side.
Lower East Side.
Yeah.
Lower East Side. And it's in this big theater building.
107 Suffolk Street.
Yes.
It's between Delancey and Rivington.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I like you. You guys are jamming off each other.
Yeah, we
I know. I feel like we're in one of those criminal procedural shows where they all stand up there and they talk about the serial killer that they're catching.
you
and
go
they
from
each,
one to the
yeah,
other.
they each say one. And I'm like, they would never do that.
Cool. Anything else you guys are in that you want to promote while we're here? I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put links to it.
I am in an improv musical theater group in Boston.
Cool.
Called BUMP, an acronym for Boston's Unscripted Musical Project. Right now we have shows every other Friday,
Okay.
sometimes Saturdays. Schedule is wonky, but in Davis Square.
Improv comedy or improv just acting?
Yeah, improv comedy.
Oh,
so
cool,
we
cool.
do a long-form improv where it's an hour-long show, and we come out, we ask the title of a musical that's never been performed, and then we perform that musical.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
That sounds cool.
yeah.
And you, anything else you want to promote?
I am back to auditioning, so I hope that someone will hire me again.
Oh yeah, and me too. Hire me.
Guys, hire Charlie and Jeff. Trust me. Cool. And you were in
Donkey Dating.
Donkey Dating,
I
right?
was in Donkey Dating.
There's already a link to it on Cassie's episode, but I'll put a link to it again on this week's episode. Anything else you guys want to promote before we end the podcast?
I mean, come see From the Deep.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I actually think a lot of this metaphysical stuff that we talked about in this episode is actually very close to what the play kind of delves into.
Oh yeah, cool.
Which is like this idea of a collective consciousness and how someone, in somewhere outside of Israel, in
I can
captivity.
hear your mother right now.
Who can't hear my mother right now?
Go
Should
on.
I wait?
No, go ahead.
Someone who is in Israel, who is in captivity or somewhere outside of Israel, can tap into the same brain space as someone in captivity in Boston, and that the two of them could have something, even though they are so different as people and cultural and all that stuff, how they can have something to share with each other and potentially use to save each other.
Hold on 1 second. Fern, I can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Should I go back? Should I say that again?
No, it's fine. I'll leave it in. People will get it.
I would say, and also if you want to talk more about any of these things that we've discussed, even getting into the metaphysical, come see the show and we'll just talk to you about anything about the show or anything we're talking about on this podcast.
At the Thursday meet and greet.
Or
right?
Or any
any
yeah,
Oh,
come
any day.
come
Any
get
show,
a
yeah.
drink with us after the show, and we're all there. We're
Yeah.
here in New York from Boston, so
Awesome.
we're bored.
Yeah, I got a lot of time off, so if you want to buy me a beer and go all metaphysical, I'm totally for it.
All right. Awesome.
And we have to get out of the space in 15 minutes, so you won't have to wait long. So
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. It was awesome.
Yeah,
Really
man.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, I kind of need guests. You know what I mean?
I hope that goes in the outtakes.
It might even just stay in the episode. It might be outtakes. I only do outtakes when there's something that I don't want to keep in the episode that I think is funny. But then,
We had some outtakes in there.
yeah, I think so. All right.
Godzilla.
I'm gonna end this. Oh, we didn't do that at all. You were okay. I'm just gonna stop this. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. Same stuff as always. Check us out on Facebook at The Generalist Podcast, on Instagram at The Generalist Podcast, on Twitter, The Generalist PC. Send us an email if you have any questions or comments at The Generalist. I do that every time. The Generalist Podcast at gmail.com. One day I'll get that right. Rate us on iTunes. We would appreciate it. I think it makes some sort of difference in life or something. Yeah, well, I don't know. If you have a minute and you care to, go ahead. If not, just don't. Check us out on YouTube. We are now on YouTube, which I said at the beginning of the podcast. It's the same thing. There's no video or anything. If you prefer to listen to the podcast on YouTube, go ahead and do that. Go check out From the Deep, playing in New York at the New York Fringe Festival. You could go to fringenyc.org to find any information you need. I will just mention the dates right now. Friday the 12th at 8:45. Monday the 15th at 9. Thursday the 18th at 4 plus. It says, I don't know what 4 plus means, but 4 plus. Saturday the 20th at 1:45. Sunday the 21st at 9:15. I will be going Saturday the 20th if you want to come hang out with me and hopefully these guys also. They're pretty cool. Just come by on Saturday and watch it play. We'll have a drink after. Anyway, enjoy your life. Anything else you might want to find? Sorry. There we go. Anything else you might want to find, like some stuff, any of the stuff that Charlie and Jeff promoted or might have to promote or might be coming up for them. I'll probably update for a couple of weeks if there's anything that comes up. Check out the show notes. You can find the show notes at our website at The Generalist Podcast at peace. What the fuck am I talking about? At thegeneralistpodcast.com, because that's how websites work. And I will put a link as well to Donkey Dating, as I said. Whatever. The whole show. You know how it works. Generalistpodcast.com. That's our website. Unless it gets hacked. It's no longer our website. Hopefully, I feel like that's not an invitation. I'm gonna